Well, one of the most heartening turns of events that we've seen this week is the preponderance of groups finally distinguishing themselves from insidious MAGA appropriation. For example, decent Christian ministers, well, they're starting to speak out against radical MAGA Christian fundamentalists. Or last night, White Dudes for Harris, they're speaking out against radical MAGA white misogyny. And in today's fantastic videos, one prominent and very important Republican makes the rounds on CNN and MSNBC to speak out against the radical MAGA Republican machine and endorse Democratic presidential candidate Vice President Harris. And in doing so, Mesa, Arizona Governor John Giles may well be one of the first decent Republicans. He may well be the only one to reject the radical MAGA appropriation of their political heritage, the Republicans' political heritage, and their governing soul. As you'll see, Giles looks at this election through the prism of what's best for the country instead of what's best for the Donald. Hey, now there's a slogan, do what's best for the country, not what's best for the Donald. Well, copyright. Anyway, when you see these two interviews, you may actually be watching history in the making, and I'll tell you why. Because if more Republicans think for themselves and their constituency and fall out of the MAGA lockstep, well, the more spray-on hair will melt on Donald's sweaty dome, as his dream of party subordination turns into his waking American nightmare. But first, a little backstory down Arizona way, the land that gave us the last decent, free-thinking Republican and Trump's scourge, the venerable, the late John McCain. Today, we meet the man following in his footsteps, Mayor John Giles. Born and raised in Mesa, he earned degrees from Brigham Young University in political science and Arizona State University's Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law, where he is now an adjunct professor. He practiced law in Mesa for nearly 30 years before working full-time as their mayor. Mayor Giles has completed 2 full-time Ironman competitions, 20 marathons, and 4 Boston marathons. That's one more than J.D. Vance. Mayor Giles and his wife Dawn have been married for more than 40 years. They have 5 children and 8 grandchildren. A real man with 5 children and 8 grandchildren voting for Harris? Put down the eyeliner, J.D., and get off the couch. Seems you've badly miscalculated. Giles also recently wrote, "Our party used to stand for the belief that every Arizonan, no matter their background or circumstance, should have the freedom, opportunity, and security to live out their American dream. But since Donald Trump refused to accept the outcome of the 2020 election, Republicans have yet to course correct." Oh. Well, the Republican Party with Trump at its helm continues down the path of political extremism, away from focusing on our fundamentals and our freedoms. That's what Giles wrote. Now, here's what Giles said on MSNBC earlier today as to why he made the choice to buck the MAGA Republican hive, the Borg, that threatens to engulf our democracy. And let me also point out, as we watch this, something very, very important to look for in this interview, because it's something that you very rarely see in conversations with Republicans these days. It's something called spine. Sit up straight and enjoy.
So, Mr. Mayor, tell us why, in your estimation, Donald Trump should not be returned to the White House.
Well, you know, I'm obviously reluctant to as a Republican, I love to endorse Republicans, and so this was a pretty thoughtful process. Also being a mayor, my preference is to avoid getting involved in public partisan fighting whenever possible. But there are certain times that you know, the question that is presented is a moral one and an ethical one and a question of character, and silence is not an option. So that's my argument to my fellow Republicans, that this is not a year that we can follow tradition or follow misplaced loyalty and vote for a Republican at the top of the ticket. Donald Trump has demonstrated that he lacks the character, lacks the commitment to the rule of law and to the United States Constitution to qualify as an elected official, let alone as President of the United States.
Donald Trump indeed lacks that character, Mayor Giles, but you do not. So now let's watch the mayor as he shows both spine and conviction over on CNN when he described the main difference between the 2 presidential choices and why, in good conscience, he made his choice.
Let's talk about the why. Why you are supporting Kamala Harris and rejecting Donald Trump, who is a Republican. What is the reason that you find her to be the preference and the preferred candidate over even Trump?
Well, I think that there's a minimum bar for elected officials in this country, and having to do with character, having to do with commitment to the rule of law and the Constitution. And I don't feel like Mr. Trump gets over that low bar. And at the same time, I do think that the vice president is a good alternative. The contrast between the two of them is stark, and President Trump does not compare well. There are many issues that, again, being a Republican, I differ with the vice president on. But what, to me, is the compelling reason to support her is that I don't question that at the top of her agenda is what is in the best interest of the United States. I honestly can't say that I think that's the case with Mr. Trump.
What's best for the country, not what's best for the Donald. While the orange stain on the GOP is indelible, guys like John Giles may actually make headway in reimagining the Republican Party as a party of serious conviction once again, as opposed to a party of serious convicts.